Now 80, Pattie Boyd is no longer keeping secrets about the life she lived in the shadow of fame. For decades, she was regarded as the stunning muse of two of rock's greatest men, her looks forever frozen in place through songs like Something and Isla. Yet behind the romance and glamour, there existed a world far more sinister than people ever imagined. For herself, the tale is no longer one of inspiration. It is a tale of betrayal, humiliation, and suffering. The muse model. Pattie Boyd's tale started a long way from London's rock stage lights. Born Patricia and Boyd on March 17, 1944 in Somerset, England. She was the oldest of four children growing up in a family influenced by turmoil and upheaval. Her father's Royal Air Force service brought the family to Nairobi, Kenya, before her parents' divorce in 1952, and her mother remarried, relocating the children to England. Pattie was a teenager in London by the early 1960s, impatient and looking for her place in the world. Her initial employment was as a shampoo girl in Elizabeth Arden's salon, a low-key start that was transformed when a photographer's assistant recognized her potential. Before long, she was adorning the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Vanity Fair. With her large eyes, flowing hair, and fragile features, she became one of the iconic faces of swinging 60s. Fashion designers, such as Aussie Clark, christened collections with her name, and her bohemian but modern style influenced trends and marked an era. But fashion was not the only thing on the agenda for her career. Boyd was discovered in 1964 and played a schoolgirl in the Beatles' film A Hard Day's Night, a minor role that altered her destiny irrevocably. She met George Harrison, the Beatles' quiet lead guitarist, when she was on set. Their romance was instant, and by January 21, 1966, they were wed. She loved him and inspired him to pen classic songs such as Something and For You Blue. Frank Sinatra famously referred to Something as the greatest love song of the past 50 years. But even in these early years, the cracks were beginning to appear. Harrison's increasing fixation on Indian spirituality and subsequent infidelities started to make Boyd feel isolated and invisible. She had quit modeling on his insistence, thinking this would make their marriage stronger, but wound up stuck playing little wife in the domestic sphere. That craving for love and approval would lead her into the arms of another man, George's best friend, Eric Clapton. Clapton's infatuation and the birth of Layla. Eric Clapton had initially met Pattie Boyd in the mid-1960s, rubbing shoulders in the same high society of London's rock and fashion elite. At that time, Clapton was already making a name as one of the most talented guitarists of his era. Having performed with the Yardbirds and subsequently John Mayall's Blues Breakers, his talent gained him the nickname Slow Hand. In 1966, he and Jack Bruce formed Cream, one of rock's earliest supergroups whose heavy blues style sent him into international stardom. But as Clapton's business life soared, his personal life was plagued by an obsession that would not release him. Although George Harrison was his close friend, Clapton was hopelessly in love with Boyd. His infatuation was no secret to his close group of friends. Bobby Whitlock remembered how Clapton talked endlessly about her, pained by the fact that she belonged to another man, his best friend, no less. Clapton's obsession found its way on a paper in 1969. Boyd was sent a letter from an anonymous fan with only the letter E as her signature. It was desperate and yearning. For aught but pleasures past, I would give my family, my God, and my very life. You may have me if you desire me. If you do not desire me, then shatter the spell that holds me captive. Years on, Boyd confessed she was shaken to her foundations. The ferocity of his words left her bewildered, flattered, but nonetheless married to George. She opted for loyalty then and informed her husband of what was occurring. Clapton's sorrow only intensified. His unfulfilled passion finally found expression in his music, climaxing in the 1970 classic, Layla, and other assorted love songs. Spurred on by the 12th century Persian legend Layla and Majnun, Clapton poured his anguish into the song Layla, a burning admission of desire and despair. The record was raw, emotive, and unmistakably aimed at Boyd. It was both a call for help and a love declaration that could be heard by the entire world for Clapton. Boyd has since confessed that the song destroyed her resolve. The realization that I had inspired such passion and creativity. The song overpowered me. I could resist no longer, she admitted. By the early 1970s, with Harrison's marriage already strained to the breaking point by infidelity and spiritual distance, Boyd began to flag. Clapton's unyielding ardor was impossible to ignore. What started as a risky flirtation would soon spark one of the most famous love triangles in rock history. Harrison's marital breakdown and Clapton's chase. By the early 1970s, George Harrison's marriage to Pattie Boyd was disintegrating. What had started as a fairy tale marriage sealed in the excitement of Beatle fever was eaten away by distance, adultery, and conflicting priorities. Harrison's identification with Eastern spirituality that once united them evolved into a lifestyle that increasingly left Boyd behind. He spent years of meditation and the Hare Krishna movement in India, while she was left feeling more and more marginalized. Boyd went on to admit that she had started to feel invisible, stuck in her role as the pretty wife with no real meaning in her life. To her solitude were added Harrison's infidelities. Boyd labeled him as a hot-headed boy who enjoyed the adoration of women who were attracted to his celebrity. Flirting that had previously been innocent turned into outright adultery. The worst betrayal occurred when she learned of Harrison's dalliance with Maureen Starkey, whose husband was Ringo Starr. Boyd remembered the shame of discovering Maureen at Friar Park, Harrison's estate, lazing around on a mattress, while George waved off her presence with insouciance. That was the final straw, a hurt that she confessed would never be healed. In contrast, Clapton's pursuit grew more overt. No longer willing to endure in silence, he approached Harrison himself in 1970, stating bluntly, "I have to tell you, man, I'm in love with your wife." It was an extreme moment. One guitarist admitting his love to another's wife in public. Harrison, famous for his reserve, responded with a combination of resignation and sarcasm, as if admitting something he could no longer deny. The rivalry between the two men filtered into music. Actor John Hurt has described seeing what he referred to as a guitar duel at Friar Park, an intense jam session in which Harrison and Clapton vented their frustration, rivalry, and anger not with fists but with guitars. Though Boyd later claimed the episode was inflated, she conceded the emotions were genuine. They were boy men, she said. Any irritation, anger, and resentment George felt were only truly expressed when he was jamming on guitar with Eric. By 1974, Boyd could no longer turn a blind eye to reality. Her life with Harrison had become unbearable, an empty shell worn down by neglect and infidelity. She abandoned him that year, closing the door on almost a decade as the wife of a Beatle. Freedom, however, did not mean peace. It only brought on a new and just as tangled tempest. For standing in the wings was Clapton, whose obsession had not lessened, but whose demons would soon devour them both. Marriage to Clapton, obsession, addiction, and betrayal. When Pattie Boyd finally broke with George Harrison in 1974, it only seemed natural that she and Eric Clapton would be together. He had been pursuing her for years, focusing his obsession into music, letters, and public pronouncements. In 1977, once Harrison's divorce from Boyd was complete, Boyd and Clapton officially started dating. 2 years later, on March 27, 1979, Boyd and Clapton were married in Tucson, Arizona. George Harrison even showed up at the wedding, playfully calling Clapton his husband. To the rest of the world, this strange setup represented a friendship bond that endured betrayal. And for a moment, Boyd's marriage to Clapton had seemed like a love affair that at last had reached its climax. But behind the grin and facade, things were much grimmer. Clapton was still in the throes of his struggles with booze and drugs. Years of heroin addiction had left their marks, and though he had been able to defeat that stage, alcoholism soon filled the void. His drinking sprees